Thank you again, everyone, for being here at our session today. The title of this forum is Distance Learning, Virtual Outreach, and COVID, How to Design Effective Programs. My name is Kaylee Sacco, and I am the Chief of Staff at the Lawrence Hall of Science, UC Berkeley's Public Science Center. I am also going to be your moderator for today. So, excuse me, before we dive in, just a little bit of housekeeping. So first, this session was put together by UC Berkeley's Coalition for Education and Outreach, or CEO. We are a staff organization for individuals on campus and in the greater East Bay who are involved in STEM education, public outreach, science communication, all those kind of interdisciplinary topics. And we typically do 6 to 10 events per academic year, which range from panels like this to resource sharing fairs to more kind of informal networking and get-togethers, hopefully in person this time next year. We also have a really active email listserv where you can find program and funding resources, events, professional development opportunities, job announcements, and all kinds of great just general discussion. So CEO is open to anyone in the wider UC Berkeley community to join, whether you're a staff member, faculty member, grad student, an ambitious undergrad, friend of the campus. So if today is your first experience with CEO, I really hope that it will not be your last. And we will pop a link into the chat for you to read a little bit more about CEO and find out how you can get involved. So more into today's program. So we're going to do a moderated panel discussion. I have some prepared questions for our panelists, and we'll also have some time for Q&A at the end. As we go through the session, please pop your questions into the chat, and my colleague Vanessa Lujan will make note of them as we go along, and we'll get to those towards the end. To keep things cohesive, I'll also ask that you keep your microphones muted throughout the panel today. And we are recording this session, so keep that in mind as you ask your questions. All right, let's start with panelist introductions. I'm going to turn it over to Lisa first to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being part of the CEO session. I'm Lisa White. I'm the Director of Education and Outreach at the UC Museum of Paleontology. And so in that role, I supervise a team and work with a number of partners to create and expand a lot of our online resources. So some of you I know are familiar with our Understanding series of websites, Understanding Evolution, Understanding Science. We have a new one, Understanding Global Change. We also have our main UCMP website. So I'm looking forward during this session to sharing with you how we've facilitated some new connections through use of those resources.
Thanks, Lisa. Next, I will hand it over to Rayna.
Hello, friends. My name is Rayna Hamilton. I'm the School Programs Manager over at the Lawrence Hall of Science. So I get to manage an awesome team of educators who are delivering programs virtually to kiddos, to community groups, anywhere from that pre-K through high school level. I've been with the museum about 10 years and have extensive background in the out-of-school time informal world as well. Nice to meet you.
Thanks, Rayna. And then last but definitely not least, we have a guest joining us from the East Coast today. So Megan, take it away.
Hi all, I'm Dr. Megan Ennis, and I am a faculty member at the University of Florida. My title is Assistant Curator of Museum Education, and I'm housed at the Florida Museum of Natural History. And I do work on how people learn in and with museums. There we go. And right now I'm doing a lot of work on how we use online learning in museums to support students and a variety of audiences. And prior to getting a PhD in science education, I was an aquarium educator for most of my professional career.
Fabulous, thank you. You may have seen we had a fourth panelist on our announcement that went out who was unfortunately not able to join us today. But I do think that our group of powerful panelists today bring a variety of experiences and perspectives in both research and practice related to distance learning, and certainly have dealt with a lot of opportunities and challenges, we'll say, over the last 9 months or so. So we do want to keep this fairly conversational. So as we go through, I do encourage you all to pop your questions into the chat so that we can get our panelists responding to your needs, concerns, questions. And feel free to also share your own examples as we go through. This is definitely intended to be a learning opportunity for everyone. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and dive in, starting with a question for both Lisa and Rayna. So wondering if you can give us an example of a distance learning program that you're running now. Tell us a little bit about the highlights and a little bit about the challenges.
Great. So I'll just go ahead and start, and I'll give two examples, but I'll make them short. And so with the first example, it's a graduate student-led effort to support instruction in introductory earth science and introductory biology classes at community colleges. And initially this program that we call Access Paleo, so it's the acronym is Advancing Community College Education for Student Success. So it started 2 years ago, largely from the initiative of a number of graduate students at the museum who were concerned that we weren't doing enough for community colleges. So our online materials reach all sorts of audiences, K through 16, but we're somewhat limited as a research museum in what we're able to do in person for instruction. You know, we give tours and we have unique and special programs that can be sort of short time affairs. But in this case, we received some initial funding to bring students, community college classes and their instructors to the museum for a 3-hour lab. So we coordinate with the instructor, make sure it made sense in a particular part of the syllabus. And it was a nice way to connect our discipline with that audience. And when things shifted to online instruction in the spring, we made a series of labs using digital images of fossils in our collection, plus the digital atlas of ancient life. There are lots of wonderful resources of digitized fossils, 3D images, and all sorts of great high resolution imagery. So those have made their way into a series of virtual labs that we have half a dozen of now, from invertebrate paleontology to vertebrate paleontology, ones that draw from our web resources like Understanding Science. But I use that as the first example as a program that started fully in person and shifted to the virtual and provided opportunities for graduate students to work closely with instructors who did value synchronous opportunities for instruction, as well as we deliver these labs asynchronously. So that's one example. And then another example is related to an NSF funded project I have with what's called the International Ocean Discovery Program. So it's a multinational effort to examine the history of the world's oceans. And there's a charismatic researchship that's part of this effort, but there's an arm of that program that is for teachers. So for K through 12 instructors and college instructors as well, to learn about the value of ocean science research in instruction and earth science instruction. And so in that case, I'm currently in the middle of a virtual class we call School of Rock, and not a very original name, but normally School of Rock is on the ship out in all these great ports in the world. But of course, with the times that we live in, we've shifted it to the virtual space. And in that example, we really benefited from a partnership with another group, the Science Education Resource Center at Carleton College in Minnesota, and they're providing a platform for us to do all sorts of additional things in the delivery of this course. So in addition to the Zoom webinars, we make use of a workspace, a virtual workspace, where the instructors can design learning materials. So in the first example, we transitioned in-person labs to the virtual in the service of community college instruction. And then the second example, we're supporting the ability for instructors to know more about ocean science through this virtual learning opportunity.
Fantastic. And so Rayna, you certainly have done a lot of work to also pivot some in-person experiences to virtual. So I'd love to hear more about what you've seen worked and what have some of the challenges been.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the rest of the world, we quickly pivoted and took account of like our resources and what we were trying to do and engage our learners. Being at the museum, our primary audience is school-age children. So we've had all these schools and community groups that had these programs booked and wanted to still have us. So then we quickly had to pivot and think about what we were going to offer. An example of some of the programs that we have offered and continue to offer, anything from workshops to school groups, to week-long camps to after-school programs. And me managing school programs, it really focuses on that school age audience. One example of the workshops that I did yesterday for a group of kindergartners. Yes, 30 kinders on a Zoom call. That program was called Let's Get Buzzy. So we really had to think about a lot of things. And this was like maybe some of the challenges. We had to think about what the kids and our teachers had access to, what they were comfortable with, and being realistic about the time that we could have with the learners, and also taking into account they're already young and it's a pandemic and there's Zoom fatigue. So we had to really take all of these challenges, think about them thoughtfully and intentionally, and then cater our work or design our programs to best fit the needs of our audience. A highlight was being able to connect with our learners. Like we missed them, we hadn't seen them, to see their faces, even if it was 30 kinders doing this on the Zoom call, but being able to see them and engage with them. And our teachers as well has been one of the highlights. Informal education, we thrive off of that face-to-face, that back and forth. So being able to do that, even if it's by way of Zoom in a way that looks a lot different from what we're used to and have been comfortable with. I've been in this game 21 years, so to get comfortable with this platform has been a challenge and a highlight.
Great, thank you. And what I love about your examples that you shared, Rayna and Lisa, is that you spanned the whole kind of range of the kindergarten all the way up to community college level. So there's distance learning happening at kind of all sections of the formal learning spectrum, right? So thank you for those examples from practice. And Megan, with your research background, I'd love to know a little bit more about what your research has shown in terms of how informal learning institutions can effectively support distance learning.
Thank you. So last fall, I started a study looking at the literature around informal learning centers offering online programming. And surprisingly or not, there's very little published in the peer-reviewed articles on best practices for informal science centers, particularly for museums. Based on the few articles we found, we were able to really pull the barriers and benefits that informal settings face when trying to offer these kinds of programs. The major benefits to offering online learning programs from these types of institutions really included increased access for audiences who aren't normally served on site. And that's something that's really become much more important this year, even beyond everything else that's been going on as far as trying to serve our normal audiences. And we've seen increased access for visitors through online programming, particularly being able to engage people with items they wouldn't otherwise be able to see. So a colleague of mine yesterday who works at the Chicago Museum of Science and Industry said they've been able to give tours of their submarine and take people virtually to places that you aren't allowed to go into at the museum because it's not safe. So they've been able to really give people insider experiences that aren't normally available for on-site programming. Online programming also allows our education staff to engage with audiences for longer periods of time, because these programs tend to be a little bit longer than maybe the on-the-floor experiences a lot of people have. And it also allows museums to collect much more data about their visitors, because we have all these analytics going on behind the scenes with the different softwares we're using. We can really learn a whole lot about who's coming, how long are they staying, what are they finding engaging. But I think the result I found most interesting from the literature search was that it increases visitors' interest in coming to our museums. So there's been a lot of concern that offering online programs will cut down on who comes, but in reality, the opposite is true, because we help people feel more welcome in our spaces. They have a better idea of knowing what to expect, and they're just more excited about coming to see us. And the major barriers that came up are things that we are all super familiar with: time, money, staffing, technical limitations, space, and even marketing concerns. How are we getting our information out there? One of the research studies showed that a lot of museums prior to this year were just relying on word of mouth to get information out about their programs. And now we're just being flooded with opportunities. So how do you fight that? So to learn more about that, after I did the literature search, I did a nationwide survey asking museums what they were doing. And what I found was museums prior to COVID were primarily offering school-based programs, K-12, using teleconferencing software. So we haven't seen, so that's where people were prior to COVID.
Thank you. I'm going to jump ahead in my kind of list of prepared questions, because I want to dig into something that you just brought up around access. So you mentioned that a major kind of benefit to offering these distance learning programs and supporting distance learning is that audiences are able to kind of go more behind the scenes, kind of engage with programming in a way that normally wouldn't happen in the kind of the in-person settings. So that does certainly increase access. But another thing that we've heard in this distance learning time is that it's perpetuating the achievement gap because of maybe a lack of access to the technical tools and to the time to access those high quality distance learning opportunities. So I'd love to hear both the kind of research and practice perspective on how can we as informal institutions and education and public outreach professionals take advantage of the benefits of the affordances of increased access to different kinds of learning experiences, while squaring that with the sort of lack of access that some students might have to getting to those high quality experiences. And I'll leave it open to anyone to start.
Well, definitely, and some of the benefits that we've seen at the museum as well is that it has widened our range of folks that we can have participate. I know for some of our summer programs, we even got responses from folks around the world that wanted to be able to come into our program. So that has definitely given us food for fodder, but also to like think about our reach. Our reach is a lot farther than just the 9 Bay Area counties now. But that has also the lack of access and opportunity as far as like technology and internet. This is something that is very real, and that as an institution and as an educator and folks that are as parents, like we're really, really concerned about. What that has done kind of on a personal an institutional level has made me think about the programs that we offer and how we can remove some of those barriers. Like I can't make your internet connection like work, like that's not within my control, but changing the way that we expect or assume folks to be able to register for our programs. We're not only with schools, we partner with community-based organizations and families. And if a barrier to participating in our program is that, hey, I don't have a computer, I can't sign onto your system, I need a paper copy, that has really forced us and to slow down and take a look at our internal processes and how we can remove some of those barriers in order to encourage participation. And to work with our partners, to be more, to ask more questions, not just to like run through, this is the things we can offer you, but really have conversations with our partners to see like, what are their needs? Give them an overview of how we do it looks like, or how we register folks looks like. And then coming to some type of like agreement as to, oh, okay, well, I can do this, we can make copies, we can send them to you, in order to remove some of those barriers. So these are some of the things that we've thought about and have instituted and continue to do the work, because it's by no means are we done with that.
Rayna, I really liked what you said there, and it brought to mind some of the conversations I had with museum educators. So after I had closed my study right before all the museums started closing. So then I redid my study and got responses from museums right immediately after everyone closed in March. And it was really interesting because we saw obviously a huge increase in the number of organizations offering online programming. And they faced all those barriers that I was talking about: shortened timelines, lack of staff capacity, and lack of technology to offer these programs. And most of the museums who started offering programming post-pandemic switched to using social media and meeting people where their audiences already were. So they reached out through Facebook Live and Twitter and YouTube. And that way their audiences didn't need access to fancy software like Zoom that puts all sorts of stuff on your computer, and maybe you don't have a computer to use it, but heck knows how much time people spend on Facebook. And so they were meeting their audiences where they already were. And I think that was really successful for a lot of people. And I've currently resent out the survey to try and see where our museums are now, 7 months since I closed the last survey. So hopefully we'll have some more insights on how people have changed. But I also was talking to someone who their museum has started offering activities that go in food bank kits. So when families come to pick up their food, they also get resources that link them either back to the museum's website or things that they can do at home with low cost, no cost materials. And I just absolutely adored that idea. And I think we are at a wonderful opportunity to think about what distance learning is. Do we need to be doing it via the computer, or do we have some old school ways that we can connect with our communities? So I'm really excited to see what kinds of creative responses our informal organizations have as we continue to move through this new and exciting challenge.
Well, I love those examples. And, in thinking about what was our general approach as an education and outreach group at a research museum in reaching the public, is that we've loaded, our web pages with all sorts of great content. It's vetted, it's trusted, it's offered at a range of levels, appropriate for different teaching and learning audiences. But it's easy to think when you do have popular web resources that people are always going to come, they're always going to find the resources, but who's always, and are we really reaching the audiences that we intend to, want to support more? And so the pandemic and the focus on virtual learning has made us be more intentional about the audiences that we want to serve. And it's also opened wider professional develop opportunities for graduate students in our network via the example I mentioned, but also just supporting them and wanting to assist us in reaching audiences that maybe we're not always aware of, that utilize our web resources or not. So that's been really great, a real positive. And yeah, and just to echo, the ongoing challenges, it's just trying to keep up with what are some or many limitations in the technology, and what sorts of bandwidth our audiences have, and just wanting to keep up with, I think, the level of information and resources that a lot of K through 12 audiences need right now, along with the scaffolding to, I think, teach it effectively.
Thank you all. I definitely heard some themes in your responses, and I'm going to try and capture those for towards the end of the conversation. But just to preview, sounds like relying on partnerships and working with other organizations is really critical for our informal learning institutions to support learners of all types in this time. So not just working with our maybe school audiences that we've partnered with previously, but working with food banks, thinking about potentially reaching out to other higher education institutions, as Lisa mentioned at the beginning, really thinking about who you are trying to serve and which community organizations are already serving those audiences, so that you can kind of maximize your service to the folks you're trying to reach. I do want to spend a little bit of time kind of thinking more about pedagogy. And before the panel today, we had sent our panelists the California Department of Education guidelines for supporting distance learning, which were very focused on a kind of formal K-12 environment and supporting those sort of formal educators. So in looking at the CDE guidelines, one thing that jumped out to me was this advice to sort of focus on active learning. And that is something that outreach as a field, I think, really excels at, but it's also something that has been challenging in the move to distance learning. So I'm curious if our panelists have seen or used some strategies that can support active learning specifically.
Yeah, for sure. Even though this is CDE and it's geared towards the K-12, like as an informal educator, I'm like, yes, 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 yes. And as an informal educator, like the hands-on active learning is at the crux of what we do and are able to do with our learners. And it really took some thinking and some pondering and some reflecting to see, like, how in the heck are we going to take active learning? Like, I can't touch you. I can't point to the thing in front of you. I can't, like, the limitations of being virtual. But we did it and are continuing to do it and are continuing to like reflect and refine on our processes and our pedagogy. But some of the strategies that I saw in this document, and I'm like, hey, we do that, are using video clips, whether that is like part of the phenomenon or to like show the relevance or the real life, like scientists doing the thing, has been really useful. Breaking up groups into smaller groups. So using breakout rooms, yes, even with kinders, in order to have them like talk through their thinking and share their ideas, or to like have them ask questions about what they're building has been super successful. Let's see what else. Collaborative work. Yeah, even on Zoom, enabling in those breakout rooms and allowing and making space for kiddos, for learners to share their ideas. This makes me think of like one of our engineering programs that we have for like 4th and 5th graders, where kiddos are designing a ship that can traverse over oobleck, cornstarch and water. So the collaborative part is that they're sharing their ideas. with each other, they're critiquing, they're asking questions, they're giving suggestions for improvement. So these opportunities for them to share in a different way has been really successful for us as a learner too, and for the kiddos. So those are some of the things that I saw on that document that really stood out to me, and how we as educators turn the programs or develop the programs into a hands-on, minds-on virtual program.
Yeah, and I'll add to that to say, in addition to trying multiple active learning strategies and making use of breakout rooms and as much type of interaction that we can utilize in those spaces, we thought a lot about the kind of media that we share and the quality of the media and the imagery. It goes without saying, we love our charismatic fossils, and there's so many great three-dimensional images that can be shared and manipulated and rotated. And, it's almost like you're there, and that's such a great way to frame, an activity or an exercise or a conversation is around actual specimens and images of high quality images of actual specimens. And so that's worked effectively. And I also want to mention some of the resources that have been great, and certainly in the teacher focused workshops for sharing out our use of Google Jamboards. So I hadn't really utilized them very much, before the pandemic, but it's been great to watch that space, be shared in a Zoom seminar with educators, posting and pasting like we would if we were all doing a gallery walk in person. So that has been a hopeful part of the virtual teaching and learning experience, which I do hope stays, and that ability, I think, to communicate our ideas in a virtual space in a way that produces a digital record that's then easy to share on.
Our museum has been doing a wide range of active learning strategies, and some we had started prior to the pandemic. So one of the things that resource mentioned was Mentimeter. And if you haven't tried it out yet, it's fabulous if you do PowerPoint presentations with any of your audiences. For example, we had a Science on Tap program that took place in bars, and when the pandemic happened, it's now Science off Tap and is happening via Zoom. But all of our presenters use Mentimeter, and they can embed graphs and charts and word clouds and things, so that as our presenters are sharing information, the audience can be engaging at the same time. So they ask them all sorts of ridiculous fun questions, as in, what do you think is the most dangerous shark? Or, what's an experience you've had with a snake? And just different ways to make sure they're staying involved and engaged. And partnerships are going to come up so many times today. And I think some of our most successful programs that have happened that still have active learning have been a result of partnerships that were already established or came around this year. And a couple of my colleagues are on the call, so please forgive me if I misrepresent the program I'm about to talk about. But we had a wonderful summer program that was supported through a grant where we were actually able to give cameras to students, underrepresented students, through their community organizations that they were already going to. And the museum was able to offer a photography camp that we normally do here at the museum, but the kids were able to do it from home and learn how to take photos and how to craft the images. And it was a wonderfully successful program because we had grant funding and community partners that were able to support the students where they were. And I'm sure my colleagues would be happy to tell anyone more about it if you'd like to know more. And I just thought that was an amazingly wonderful program. And Lisa, you reminded me of another one we had going on, where we actually 3D printed megalodon teeth fossils to send to students. So even though they couldn't come to us, we got a small grant, an institute I'm part of, to mail out Megalodon teeth so they could still be engaged. And I believe the instructions for how to print them were freely available for teachers that had access to their own printers, or anyone else who would like to have their own Megalodon tooth. So I just think our museum and informal science community has been so creative in how to keep students engaged this year.
I
Those
agree,
are all
Megan.
fabulous
Oh, yeah.
examples. Sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
Oh, no, I just wanted to say thanks for sharing that example of the 3D images or the printable fossil, which has been great way. And other museums have done that too with, comes with instructions for 3D printing.
I might have to go print myself a Megalodon tooth once I get
Right?
access to campus again and can go visit our makerspace. Sounds pretty neat to me. Those were all really great examples because they all kind of shared like things that we know already work in effective public outreach programs, right? Like building interactivity, relying on kind of objects and hands-on experiences, exploring phenomena, talking through the design cycle with students, giving them opportunity for feedback and critique. So those are great examples of how to translate those things that we know work really well into different kinds of virtual settings that are still supporting the kind of formal education sphere while also bringing what we do uniquely as informal education institutions. So thank you for sharing. We are almost to the end of 2020, thank goodness. And look, now I personally want to do a lot of looking forward. So in thinking back about what we've learned this year about what works for distance learning, how can our field support distance learning? I'm curious what sort of practices you have found in these programs that you think are sort of scalable for moving forward. Like what might we continue into 2021 and beyond?
Well, I'd have to say it's the virtual space for sharing. So there are a number of well-regarded science centers working within the geoscience community that are the place, to post learning materials and resources. And so we've long looked to those sites, even, pre-pandemic, for being able to reach other audiences with work that we're crazy about if we think that we have a good lesson. And so now that people have been forced to really take full advantage of any kinds of digital resources, seeing those platforms really grow and encourage more people to contribute materials. And one additional example I want to mention that I didn't include earlier, and it's a specialized group, but within the community of geoscience professionals that do field work or that run field camps and field courses, needless to say, there was a complete shutdown of all of those in person and a lot of panic because field work is still seen as very foundational in earth science degree programs at the college level. But there's been incredible creativity in transitioning many of those field courses to an online space and with the support of these platforms that host them. And there's also been some NSF funding to encourage that. And what it's also done is finally get the geoscience field-based community to really face the inaccessible challenges that have long been, a part of this sort of, stereotypical expectation that, you must complete this kind of course to, get the degree. So the complete rethinking and the acceptance of quality ways that you can deliver, a kind of field related instruction in a virtual space is just here to stay. So we're finally coming up with creative solutions to what's long been, a problem with lack of accessibility to some parts of our learning requirements.
Yeah, just to piggyback on what Lisa just mentioned, um, virtual learning is not going away once this is resolved. It's here to stay. We're in California, there's lots of wildfires. Things are often getting shut down for some reason. And I think that in like looking towards the future and moving towards the future, the insights that we've gained from the last 9 months, coupled with the action that we all want to take policy-wise and personal, is something that will catapult us into the future, whether that's making changes on a personal or an institutional or a statewide level. I think that is one thing that is really that we have to look forward to as well.
And Rayna, that is such an important point. It's not going away. It's going to be the future. And we have found that we are serving students who wouldn't otherwise have access to our museum resources, and to start to dial that back now then removes those resources from being available. One program in particular we have is called Scientists in Every Florida School, where we partner scientists to do programming and educational experiences with students, either as a role model or some sort of hands-on activity. And that has all gone virtual this year. And so it's great because we've managed to expand this from 5 counties where we started to now serving all 67 counties in our state. And our scientists are more excited about participating in this because they don't have to drive to get there. They don't have to find out how to get into the school and this, that, and the other. So I think it makes it much more scalable for all of the partners that we bring in to do these programs. But one of the things that jumped out at me on that document that you shared was being protective of your time. I think that's one of the problems we've found with Zoom is we schedule ourselves for so many things now because we don't have to get up and walk from one place to the other, that we back to meetings, and we are all so zoomed out. And I think it will be very important for our educators to remember, just because we can do 9 Zoom programs in a day, maybe doesn't necessarily mean we should, because unless you have like 6 different people doing those 9 programs, because we can't do it and we can't sustain it long term. So that is not a sustainable. A lot of what we've done this year is not sustainable. So we need to think about how to take the best of what we've done moving forward and do it in a more reasonable manner.
I think that is, all of you made such important points, but that's a great kind of concluding point there on what of these practices are sustainable and what will truly be scalable in the long term. I think it's really important for us as educators to, again, be thinking about, kind of goes back to that, like, who are we serving? What's our mission? How are we meeting our mission? Being very strategic and core to who we are as we think about what we're offering, and expanding that as we look again towards the future. So I also just wanted to sum up a little bit some of the themes I heard throughout the discussion, and then we'll go into some Q&A. Again, we heard a lot about kind of using this time to don't take for granted that we are reaching who we want to reach, that this is a time for us to be more intentional in our partnerships, more intentional in our own marketing and outreach strategies, to think about how we are amplifying our impact and meeting our mission. It's a time for us to rethink our internal processes to make sure that we're effectively doing that. And I think Rayna put it really well, that the insights we've gained with the action we want to take, both policy-wise and on a personal level, are really going to determine what we do moving forward in 2021 and a transformed educational landscape. So again, thank you all panelists for your thoughtfulness here. And let's make sure that we get some time for questions. So thank you to those of you who have been submitting those in the chat as we go through. We will start with a question that was specifically directed to Rayna, but perhaps we can open it to all the panelists as well who didn't get a chance to see that in the chat. What are some activities that have really helped to keep students engaged in a, like, especially in a Zoom focused setting? We talked about some of those phenomena, some of those object-based lessons, but wondering if there are any other sort of specific examples that you've seen work really well.
Yeah, some of the things that have worked well for us, and we didn't know if it worked well until we tried it and tweaked it. So some of the things that we discovered that work really well are all the things Kaylee just said about phenomena-based, things where we could actually send a kit over to schools and the kids would have something to work towards. Mystery-based, everybody loves a good mystery, a good whodunit. So putting in the processes of science into a mystery so that learners could have an opportunity to engage in those. Engineering design challenges, whether that's just like grab a piece of paper and we're going to build airplanes and launch them, and here's parameters and you're going to iterate, those opportunities. Another, like where they had a thing or an object base, was like, go grab a leaf. Like, we're going to have this workshop, this class, everyone bring a leaf. So that they could have like a leaf investigation, or roly-poly. We're going to do a week-long investigation on roly-polies. Using live animal webcams. Everybody loves a good animal. And hey, we have access to all the animals everywhere. So you could literally pick the animal. Your class can pick Komodo dragons, and we will explore and investigate Komodo dragons. So those are some of the fun things that we've been doing.
Great, and I did see a little bit of more discussion in the chat too around focusing on sort of kit-based activities and outdoor learning. So if you haven't been perusing the chat, make sure you take a look at some of those examples from participants as well. So another question that came in was, what are some good ways to virtually incentivize students? This person is finding it difficult to identify tangible prizes that can be sent globally, and are looking for fun ways to motivate students that are free and low cost. So thoughts from the panel on incentivizing students.
Well, we don't regularly send fossils out as a, as a prize. We're not typically in the business of giving them away, but reflecting on Megan's example and knowing the extent to which that, you know, replicas of objects can be, you know, printed or made, you know, that's always fun. We, you know, we love our stickers, even if, you know, they're virtual stickers, and I think for younger kids, but yeah, that's a great question, and just how to reward and motivate and incentivize.
I was just going to say, similar to stickers, the only program I really came across was Smithsonian has their Quests program, and students are awarded badges as they go through the process. I'm not sure how everybody feels about badging. I know they use it everywhere from teacher professional development through students. So whether it's really an incentive, I think depends on the student, but that's another option to look at, is badging.
That's interesting, Megan. I was going to bring that up as well. The incentive for the kiddos and the learners that we like, that's not a huge problem. Like, they're excited because they're going to do this thing and they know Lawrence Hall of Science. So we don't have to think about incentivizing too much. But I have heard, and digital badges have been around forever, and some folks love them and some folks hate them. I won't go into that now. But maybe that could be a way where they're working towards some type of badge or title or process skill thing that they can show off in some way. So might be interesting to explore and see if it works for you and your organization and your goals of your programs.
Yeah, and certainly badging or kind of like the leveling up incentive has been around in other sort of virtual learning or distance learning platforms like Khan Academy, right, for a really long time. So perhaps worth looking at how our institutions are implementing those strategies as well. And then so the next question, I personally love this as someone with an evaluation background. Have any of you all been doing assessment or surveys for your virtual programs? And how have you changed any of the program components based on feedback?
We have not had any formal surveys. It has all been talking to the teachers that have participated in, so having those conversations with them before and after. Something that we learned was that what we thought would fit into 30 minutes actually took 60 minutes, and it actually worked well for kinders. So we've really had a lot of conversations versus like formal survey and assessment. But as this virtual learning is a real thing that is here to stay, and it's being part of a major research institution, that is something that I'm super interested in moving forward.
Yes, well, we've been definitely taking advantage of some real-time feedback from instructors as we've delivered materials for the community college audience, and then also the project with the ocean sciences community. And we're able to make some changes on the fly, or well, I shouldn't say on the fly, but as it's happening, because we want to respond in real time if things need tweaking. And because we weren't completely prepared to deliver in the manner that we have, we don't have the best survey design instruments, and aren't even funded to do robust evaluation. But now that we know what we're doing or what we want to do in the future, we're certainly building those surveys in.
I do know some of the evaluation research groups that do work in informal science centers will be starting some professional development on how to do evaluation. They have not completed it yet, but it is coming down the pipeline. So I'm sure there will be lots of information shared about that. But that just kind of ties back to the two main takeaways that will make this sustainable are partnerships and professional development. And it is so vital that our organizations invest in both of these things, because partnerships can really help you with the heavy lift to make sure that you are not trying to do everything all at once by yourself. There are organizations that complement the work you do in ways that can help you do it even better between the two of you. It will help with cost and staffing and all of those challenges. Partnerships can help bring them together. And we absolutely need to be supporting our educators through professional development. We are asking our education community to do things that they were never prepared to do, and they have done a fabulous job, but we need to make sure we're including time and resources for educators to participate in professional development. What that looks like yet, hard to say, because as I said, no one's really looking at this yet. That's something I'm trying to get funded right now, is professional development for online learning for museum educators. But I did recently share a blog on the American Alliance of Museums about how to use partnerships and professional development to make programs more sustainable. And I will drop that in the chat for anybody who's interested in reading a little more about that.
Fabulous. It certainly goes back to this, I think, also takeaway too, that there's a lot of potential for additional kind of research and transformation in our field as we think about how we're coming out of this time into 2021. So we are, that was the last question that I came across in our chat, which speaking of Zoom fatigue means we might end a little bit early and folks can reclaim a little bit of their time today. But before you jump off, I just want to say a huge thank you to our panelists today. I hope that you all learned a little bit about both their programs and their expertise and backgrounds that you can apply to your own work. And I will ask them just to pop their contact information into the chat for any follow-up conversations. I also want to give a special thanks to my colleagues, Vanessa Lujan, Lisa White, and Ryan Madden for co-designing today's session for you all. And a huge thanks to Kate Spohr, Lale Cote, and the CEO Steering Committee for the opportunity to set this up. And again, thank you to you all for being here, being engaged in the chat, and look forward to getting the recording out to the CEO community soon. Have a fabulous afternoon. Thank you.